Everyone abandoned a paralyzed woman in the harsh Arizona desert, except one brave carpenter. Watch his heroic story unfold. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing tales. Let's get started. In the remote deserts of Arizona, life moved slowly, and news traveled even slower. The sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked earth, casting long shadows over abandoned homesteads and dry creek beds. Among the scattered desert settlements, whispers began to circulate about a woman left alone, paralyzed and helpless. Her family had abandoned her without a second thought, claiming she was more burden than blessing. Travelers who dared venture near her location spoke in hushed tones about the small, crumbling cabin where she had been left, warning others that no one could or would help her in that unforgiving wilderness. Dust and sand swirled around the skeletal remains of her home, broken boards jutting out at odd angles, and a roof barely holding together. The wind moaned through the gaps in the walls, carrying with it the scent of dried sage and the faint odor of neglect. Locals avoided the area, fearful of trouble or scandal, leaving the woman to face the desert on her own. Stories of wandering coyotes and rattlesnakes that roamed freely made the place seem cursed. Yet even amid such despair, there remained a sliver of hope. Hope embodied in the form of Thomas Hayes, a quiet carpenter known for his steady hands and big heart. Thomas had spent most of his life crafting furniture, repairing homes, and helping neighbors with whatever needed fixing. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke louder than anything anyone could say. When he heard of the woman's plight, something inside him stirred. He could not, in good conscience, ignore the cries of someone who had been abandoned, left to survive against impossible odds. Mounting his old, sturdy horse, Thomas set out toward the distant cabin, the sun climbing higher in the sky with each mile. He rode through winding canyons, over rocky ridges, and past dry washes where only the hardiest of desert plants could survive. When he arrived, the sight that met him was worse than he could have imagined. The cabin was barely standing, its walls splintered and its door hanging loosely on broken hinges. Inside, the woman was slumped against the far wall, her body stiff and unresponsive from months of neglect. Her eyes, wide and fearful, locked onto his as he stepped closer, and for a moment Thomas felt the weight of her despair settle over him like a heavy cloak. Dust clung to her hair, and her clothes were tattered, yet her gaze, though timid, seemed to plead silently for someone to care. Thomas didn't hesitate. He dismounted, careful not to spook his horse, and approached her slowly. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "I'll take care of you." His voice, steady and calm, carried a reassurance she hadn't felt in months. She hesitated, uncertainty flickering in her eyes, but the sincerity in his tone and the gentle touch of his hand convinced her that this stranger might truly be different from everyone else who had walked past without stopping. With painstaking care, Thomas lifted her from the dusty floor, mindful of every movement so as not to cause her pain. She trembled in his arms, but a faint glimmer of trust began to replace the fear that had defined her existence for so long. As he carried her outside, the harsh sunlight no longer felt like a threat, but a promise of life beyond the cabin's decaying walls. Each step he took across the rugged terrain was a step toward hope, toward safety, and toward a future she had long thought impossible. Even in the vast, unforgiving desert, Thomas knew the journey ahead would be long and difficult. But he also knew that some battles were worth fighting, not for glory or reward, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Helping this woman was more than a duty. It was a chance to restore her faith in humanity. As the wind swept through the canyons and the sun began its slow descent, casting a golden hue across the landscape, Thomas's resolve hardened. No matter the obstacles, no matter the skepticism of those who had abandoned her, he would be her protector, her guide, and her hope. And so, in that quiet desert, A humble carpenter carried a broken woman from the shadows of despair into the light of possibility, showing that even in the harshest corners of the Wild West, courage and compassion could thrive against all odds. Thomas spent every day pouring his heart into rebuilding not just a home, but a life. He chose an old, abandoned barn near the outskirts of town and transformed it into a safe haven. With sturdy timber and careful craftsmanship, he repaired the walls, reinforced the roof, and built wide, gentle ramps that would allow her to move safely. Every plank he cut, every nail he hammered carried purpose. He even fashioned a handmade wheelchair, carefully padded and fitted, along with tools that allowed her to perform small tasks on her own. The barn slowly became a place of comfort and hope. At first, neighbors watched from a distance, whispering and shaking their heads. A carpenter, they said, should stick to building furniture, not meddling in affairs that weren't his concern. Some openly mocked him, calling his efforts futile or foolish. Yet Thomas ignored the ridicule, focusing solely on the woman before him. With each passing day, the change was undeniable. The woman who had once sat in despair began to respond, her eyes lighting up at small victories, her voice trembling as she spoke more freely. Thomas's dedication was unwavering, and slowly curiosity turned into respect. Months passed, and the paralyzed woman began to regain a measure of independence. Simple tasks, holding a cup, rolling herself along the ramps, even helping with chores in the barn, became triumphs that fueled her spirit. Thomas taught her, patiently demonstrating how to manage tools, organize her belongings, and navigate the small yard outside. Laughter, once absent, began to echo through the barn. The sound, soft at first, gradually grew bolder, replacing the haunting silence of abandonment. It was a melody of resilience, a testament to what patience and compassion could achieve in the harshest of environments. But the work extended beyond physical repairs. Thomas also nurtured her confidence, encouraging her to dream again. He reminded her that she was not defined by her paralysis, and that her worth had never been tied to her family's abandonment. He shared stories of the desert, of people who had faced impossible odds and prevailed, and with every tale, the woman's courage grew. Together, they transformed the barn into a home, a sanctuary filled with warmth, laughter, and the quiet triumph of human determination. Word of Thomas's efforts began to spread. Skeptics turned into supporters, neighbors offering food, blankets, or small comforts to aid in her recovery. The community, once hesitant to intervene, watched in awe as a simple carpenter accomplished what many thought impossible. He had not just saved a life, he had restored dignity, independence, and hope. The story of the man who refused to leave a woman behind inspired others, reminding everyone that heroism often came in quiet, unassuming forms, far from the gunfights and saloons that defined the Wild West in legend. Despite the admiration he received, Thomas never sought recognition or reward. He continued his work silently, driven by the knowledge that the woman before him was finally safe, finally seen, and finally valued. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he would sit quietly in the barn doorway, watching her navigate her surroundings, her laughter mingling with the wind through the rafters. The hardships of the past seemed to fade, replaced by the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt through care, courage, and unwavering commitment. In the end, the tale of Thomas Hayes became a quiet legend across the state. People remembered the carpenter who ventured into the desert to lift a broken woman from despair, who built ramps, chairs, and tools not for glory, but for love and compassion. He proved that heroes weren't always the fastest drawer in the West or the boldest gunslinger in town. Sometimes heroes were men like Thomas, ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in heart. Men willing to stand up when everyone else turned away, and in doing so, changed a life forever. And so, in the dusty heart of Arizona, amidst the harsh winds and the unforgiving desert sun, a woman's second chance blossomed. It was a story not of wealth, power, or fame, but of courage, resilience, and humanity, the kind that leaves a mark far deeper than any legend of guns or gold ever could. The Carpenter's promise had been kept, and in that promise, the Wild West revealed a hero of a very different kind.